Hey everybody, I'm back with the run through of my timeline of world record comic book sales. And this particular sale is one of the more interesting ones that I've run into kind of ever because it was never on the list until this version. Always in 1985, 84, it listed in the 85 guide, but in 1984, the sale that we had was the Church Action number one selling for $25,000, which was a crazy amount of money and blah, 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 and has been like an anecdote that we've talked about a lot. And that sale did happen, but the bigger sale that year was the $35,000 paid by Steve Geppi to John Snyder for the Church Marvel Comics number one, which had just set the previous record. That was the book that broke 13,000. So because I discovered, and it wasn't like it was hidden, it was in the price guide, and somehow I had never read the paragraph at the same time that I was doing the list, and nobody else had noticed because other people have put together this timeline, and it was always, we just slotted in the Church Action 1 selling for $25,000 in 84 because it's this like common anecdote that we just trot out. And but it was never the record holder. It was this book, the Marvel Comics number one. So because I had never noted this sale, and a previous version of this list had another sale for 17,500 for this same book, there's a gap in the data that doesn't make sense. So the book has to have landed, the last owner before John Verzel has to be Steve Geppi, because we know the story. John has told the story. R.I.P. John Verzel, monster collector extraordinaire, missed by everyone in the hobby. But he talked about this. He's talked about it to multiple people, how, when he was trying to get the book and he kept looking at it, trying to find anything that was wrong with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and eventually traded it for over $100,000 worth of value. So the first book to be valued at over $100,000, by the way. But we know for a fact that Geppi was the last person to own it before Verzel. So if we have three sales, so Snyder buys the book in 1979 for $13,500 through Geppi, sells it back to Geppi, which is the what we thought happened or have talked about having happened, for $17,500, which has just been bandied about and discussed on the forums for a long time. So I've always taken it at face value that it was an existing sale, and I still don't doubt it. The problem is if he sold it back to Geppi for $17,500, there's no reason to sell it back to Geppi in 1984. So there has to have been another sale in there, and I've heard some discussion of a sale in 1982, but I don't have a price for that, and I don't have anything other than kind of some kind of backroom discussions of it. So I can't include the 17,500 because it's not documented anywhere, and it doesn't make sense without an attendant sale in this 1982 sale, neither of which I can verify outside of kind of conversations that I've had. And these are conversations with people who I trust, but I still am kind of in a quandary here because these other two sales, including the same people, right, involving the same people, were very high profile. They were in the news. They were in the Overstreet Price Guide, and these other two sales didn't, which is possible. But I would like to just verify, and so I'm working on it. It might take a while because you guys are keeping me busy, actually, doing work here for YouTube. So I don't know when I'm going to be able to get to researching that one, but I will. I'm going to try and figure it out because it's really interesting to me nailing down some of these earlier records. Because it's the fun kind of mystery part of the hobby. Everything that's happened since 2000, not everything, but a lot of what's happened since 2000 is very well known and very well documented. These early records are not so well documented. So anyway, this book changed hands for $35,000, which is a remarkable amount of money. A bunch of other Church copies traded hands in 1984, many of which have not moved since. And yeah, so this puts the cap on Marvel Comics #1 as the supreme book in the hobby. That trade, the 1989 trade for over $100,000, is probably the true end of it, but by that point already, Action #1 and Detective 27 were pushing to dominate the records. And those books would go on to dominate the records for the next 40 years. But this is where it was just, Marvel Comics #1 was just the king. Okay, so sometime in 1990, the Detective Comics #27 Allentown copy was sold by Metropolis for $80,000 to the current owner. This was Steve Fischler, Metropolis alone selling the book to its current owner, although, both Fischler and James Payette were involved in bringing the Allentown books to market. This is the best known copy of the #1B book in the hobby. It's the second most valuable comic in the world. It's been in the same collection for 24 years. I see no chance of it ever moving. So there you have it. And it was a record holder. And this was a cash sale in 1990. So Action Comics #1, sold by Sotheby's for $82,500 to Metropolis, acting as an agent for actor Nick Cage in September of 1992. This is from the second Sotheby's auction, which of course I'll talk about eventually. I'll talk about all of the Sotheby's auctions and the Christie's ones as well eventually, because I love looking through those catalogs. If I can get any excuse to look through those catalogs, it's fun. So I don't actually have time for it here and don't know all the lore off the top of my head, but this book was stolen from Cage's house and returned to the hobby in a 9.0 holder, breaking the $2 million barrier in 2011. The Sotheby's grading committee, some of whom are still around, must have been pretty happy at how strict they were, grading it at kind of VF, VS minus, versus the very fine near mint we see now in a CGC holder. We went from $1,000 in 1973 to $10,000 in 1979, and then it took another 14 years to break the $100,000 barrier. And of course, it was Steve Geppi. This is a book I've talked about and will talk about again, often. This is the, quote, fine 68 copy, as it's listed in the price guide, or as I refer to it, the other high-grade copy, as it's more accurately portrayed. This was Comics 27, the other high-grade copy, selling sometime in 1993 from Dave Anderson from Oklahoma for $101,000 to see Steve Geppi sometime in 1993. So Geppi, again, is involved in a world record comic book sale. What would we do without him, is the question I ask. And that's aside from Diamond, which is an entirely different set of conversation points. But in terms of like the high end of the hobby, he's been involved and has helped drive the hobby forward in a way that very few other people can lay claim to. So, okay, so in 1994 sometime, Detective 27 Church copy was sold in a private sale for $125,000. I've got to note that this might have been the owner of the Allentown Detective 27 selling his undercopy, but I will have to dig into that a little bit. I don't actually know what happened to this book between the original 1978-1979 dispersal of the books in the hobby until this point, which actually seems kind of crazy. You would think that this book would be noted. I don't know. We can make some guesses, but they're just guesses. This book is currently in a CGC 8.5 holder. It is in the census and has been graded. So, very cool. Now we've got Action Comics #1, the current CGC 8.5 copy, which was sold by PCE for $137,500 to Daniel Kramer sometime in 1995. This is the Rusty Staple CGC 8.5 copy, which was for a long time the highest graded copy of Action #1 in the census. It was also the highest the most valuable CGC graded book for a long time. It wasn't until the Nick Cage copy came in from the cold, it wasn't until then that a 9.0 showed up in the census, and that was in 2012. It had actually already sold for $2 million before it showed up in the census. As that year, 2011, the census wasn't updated for an entire 6 months. So from June 27th until January 2012, there were no census updates. So the 9.0 had shown up, sold for $2 million, and the Action number 1 CGC 8.5 was still the top census copy, which is kind of funny. They're much quicker these days at getting the census updated, which is great because it's not good if the market doesn't have as much information as possible. This was, like I said, was the most valuable CGC graded book for a long time. It's now supplanted by 4 other copies. So the Detective Comics number 27, CGC 9.2, the 2 9.0s, and the Kansas City copy 8.5. But still, it's a legendary book, and yeah, it's held a record twice. So. Okay, so we've got Superman VF Church copy sold by Redbeard, Ron Purcell, for $170,000 to Bashara Malouf in July of 1995. This was at San Diego Comic-Con. This is the most valuable book I've seen in person. I haven't seen anything in the top 10, and I have this book at number 11 in my newly expanded most valuable comic books in the world list, which I will be talking about sometime soon. Bashara brought it to a show he was running in the basement of a hotel in Brookline, Massachusetts in 96, 97. It was like in one of those crazy old school fortresses, and was like the center of his display, and it was just like blew my mind. It looked great. I mean, if you've seen scans of it or photos of it or whatever, it continues to look great. Yeah, wow, blew me away. This sale was on CNN, and my mother, who had met Bashara, I used to do a little work for him, doing some comic stuff, and of course sold a bunch of books to him over the years. So he'd been to my house, met my mother. She saw the report of him and Ron Purcell at San Diego and called me. It was like, "Was that your friend?" I was like, "Yes, he's a pretty big comic collector." So, very cool book, very cool, and I've loved to kind of track the progress of this one over the years. Spoilers for a little later on in the list. So, okay, here we go. So things are starting to come together. So this is the dawn of the CGC era, and John Verzel capped off the best timely collection in the world at the dawn of the CGC era by buying the best Captain America number 1 in the world. This is now a CGC 9.8 and is likely a $5 million book. As a note, I am not sure if this sale took place in 2000 or 2001. I'll have to dig around. I have it marked as 2001, but I'm not 100% sure where I got that date from, and seem to remember it being slightly earlier. It might have been in the price guide, so I'll have to grab the 2001 price guide and 2002 to see if it was listed there. I'm sure it was listed, but this might get shifted. Data always gets shifted. I don't feel bad if I adjust dates as I get better information. So, but Captain America Comics number 1, Allentown copy by an unknown seller for $260,000 to John Verzel sometime in 2001. And here's the book in its old holder. I don't actually even know where I got this scan, because this is a scan I took. You can see that it's from a printout. It's not a photo. So, but I don't know. Okay, now things are getting very interesting for me. This is the missing Mastronet copy, one of the triumvirate of books that collectively are my white whale. So I've talked about that in another video, 5 missing $1 million comics. I'll add a link to that in the description. This is Detective Comics number 27, CGC 8.0, the missing copy, sold by Mastronet for $278,000. $278,210 at the end of 2001. I actually have the date listed somewhere, but I don't have it in my notes. So trust me, it's later on in the year. So, and there's the copy. I scanned this from the Mastronet catalog. I have a giant scan of this on the photo sharing site Flickr, so I'll drop that in the description as well, so you can take a look at it. Okay, we are getting to the end, near the end of this video. I'm gonna end right before one of the longest droughts that the hobby has seen in terms of the record changing, and one that I was paying attention to with very huge amounts of detail, because I was already comics blogging, I was on the CGC forum, and we would discuss everything, trying to figure out when the record would be broken. So this is also kind of a sad story for a while, although it's turned things around over the years. This was the record holder that couldn't make its money back when it came up for auction multiple times. Who's laughing now is this book has since been maximized to a 9.2 and is sold for like $2.5 million. But it resold twice in the 2000s and lost money both times. So it sold for $350,000 and then sold for, I don't remember, $218,000 or something like that. Anyway, JP the Mint, his entry into the comic market deserves kind of a long video. The stuff he bought was crazy, but he had a rough time making the money he expected from the hobby and kind of exited probably too early. There were some other forces going on at the time, obviously, but I have his catalog around here somewhere, which is just by itself is worth a video to just look at what he had picked up in just a short period of time. So, but yeah, Marvel Comics #1, pay copy, sold by Steve Geppi for $350,000 to JP the Mint in January of 2003. And we are going to finish off with, well, there's a copy of the book. So it's in a new holder now. This is the original scan of the book from that era. And as you can see, there's a lot more information on the label than they would put on right now. Anyway, those labels were so busy back then. And then finally, here we go. We have another JP the Mint special. This one also lost money when resold at Heritage, although eventually it sold for $450,000 in 2010. Flash Comics #1, church copy by an unknown seller for $350,000 to JP the Mint sometime in 2004. And I'm going to stop there because knowing how much information and how many thoughts I have on the $1 million sales that happened later, and how much of like my own contemporaneous notes I have, I may have to do two videos, basically one on the jump from 1 million to 2 million to 3 million, and then the recent sales, or maybe I'll just do all the $1 million sales in one final video in this list. But it's just going to be a lot of content, and this is already kind of 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how long it is when I edit it down. So we'll just do a short one in the middle, and then the next one's going to kind of be an epic journey through so much popcorn, so much just watching auctions and just like being, my head spinning. So, let me show you the book. I didn't even show you the book. I'll show you. It's actually a gorgeous, gorgeous book. There it is, Flash Comics #1, Edgar Church Mile High copy. Look at the preservation of that thing. That's $1 million book now, right? That whatever was wrong with it before that had it lose money when it resold, it's the shine is back on it. Look at that thing. So, like I said, anyway, I'll be back soon, maybe a couple of weeks. I do have a couple of other videos to get through to talk about the $1 million sales and breaking that barrier, and how long it took, and why it took so long, and how amazing it was to kind of watch it happen. So thanks if you've made it all the way through this one. I appreciate it. As always, like and subscribe if you haven't. Share with your friends. And I'll see you in the next one.